Hey guys, so this week's prom is talking about intersectionality, and something that I wanted to point out, in my life, I find a lot of overlap between my gender and my race, especially in my household, and I usually don't have to think about my identity in public. A lot of the time, racism has become a thing at Oregon State, but other than that, um, I'm just a conglomeration of all my parts, and that's who I am, and that's how all my identities intersect. And yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. Anyways, talking about the readings, I'd like to start off with the definition of racism, and I really liked the way that they kind of put this. It described racism as not a personal ideology, but a system involving cultural messages and institutional policies on tops of the beliefs and actions of individuals. And I think it's really important to remember that racism is a system, and by changing one person's views or outlooks in the world and picking that battle is not going to change the whole system. And I think on our part, we remember that all the time. We have to remember that things aren't going to change, and that it's sad for us. It brings us sorrow. But for white people, I don't think they see racism that way, the same way that we do, obviously, because that's not something they consider. And it goes again with the philosophy that white privilege is a privilege in general, but it's not something that people notice. And that goes kind of with the conversation I was having in class about me being in honors college. I forget that that's an advantage. I forget that that's a privilege, and it makes me feel bad about myself because I don't notice those things. Um, Something about the reading that I really liked and I would like to discuss was how all people of race do not experience racism equally, but similarly that all people, all white people, do not have the same abilities or the same advantages as the rest of the group. And that's important to remember with disabled white people versus a able-bodied colored person. There is disadvantages, and we don't experience those on the same level as everyone else. There was a critique that I had about the reading, and it was talking about how white people talk about how racism hurts them, and they talk about the fear of white people of color. I didn't really understand what was happening in that section, and I didn't want to make assumptions, so I'm gonna not talk about it that much. But yeah, okay, so on page 69, it talks about how long a person has been in a certain country, and that really reminded me of the Parks and Rec episode where Aziz Ansari is talking to someone, and they're in the back of this van, and the person's like, "Hey, so where are you from?" And he names some state. I forgot what state, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm from there," and they're like, "No, where are you really from?" And he's like, "I'm from that state," and I think it's upsetting how people don't white people are not accepting of colored people associating themselves as American or as citizens. It kind of upsets me, but that was a side thought. Okay. So I really, really wanted to talk about the Lord Cancer journals, but before I go into that, I have another critique about the Kimberly Crenshaw article, and it was talking about a dynamic change between family and private matters as history goes on. But sadly, that's not the way that it is in all countries. And in India, rape is still a very private thing in your household. People don't discuss it, people don't know what's generally happening. So even if there has been a dynamic change here, maybe not so much as we would like to see, it's definitely very prevalent in other countries. That's just something to keep in mind. Other than that, I didn't really know what the article was talking about, and I didn't want to make assumptions. So if anyone else knows what was happening, could you please explain it to me? Yeah, but the Lord Cancer journals. Okay, I thought it had such a powerful beginning, and I'm gonna quote it. So the weave of her everyday existence is the training ground for how she handles crisis. Then it goes into saying, silence has never bought us anything of worth. And I completely agree. I believe that girls and students and daughters have been taught to hold their tongues, and that only allows us to manifest in our negative emotions. And our intelligence is squandered, our reciprocation and validation is completely non-existent, and that's not the way it should be. That's not the way that households should be, or community in general. Girls have so much to offer, and in certain countries like in India, that's still, it's becoming better, but that's still virtually that identification that girls have things of value to bring to the community. there's no support of that. And I felt so strongly about this that I had to write it down, and I'm just going to read off what I wrote. So my wish for women, no matter what race or age, no matter where they are in their lives, it's to find strength and to find their voice. I feel that I have personally endured a lot as a woman within my household and amongst peers and colleagues. And whether that was unintentional or not, on their part, I still carry the effect of that in my everyday life, the effect of their words and their actions. And I hope that women all across the world can find their inner goddess, Brandy, and be seen. I hope that women can feel heard and feel like they matter. And the ending was so powerful to me, and I loved it. It was talking about basically, don't let yourself become your own enemy.